Welcome, everyone, to Working People, a podcast about the lives, jobs, dreams, and struggles of the working class today. Working People is a proud member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and is brought to you in partnership with In These Times magazine and the Real News Network. This show is produced by Jules Taylor and made possible by the support of listeners like you. My name is Maximilian Alvarez, and first, I want to apologize to everyone out there about not having a new episode for you guys last week. I was back home in Southern California with my family for my grandpa Fletcher's funeral, so I obviously needed to take a break from that, and I really do appreciate y'all being so patient and kind during this difficult time for our family. But to pay you guys back for last week and to honor the sacred holiday of May Day, aka International Workers' Day this Friday, we're going to have 2 episodes dropping on the feed for y'all this week. And in today's episode, we're talking about what May Day means for workers in the labor movement here and now in the year of our Lord 2026, and about the plans for a national day of protests that are going to take place this Friday on May 1st in cities and towns around the country. As journalist and friend of the show Michael Sinato reports at The Guardian, quote, labor unions, democratic organizations, and community groups are organizing an economic blackout this year to commemorate May Day, International Workers' Day, inspired by the economic blackout in Minnesota during the massive ICE operation in the state. May Day strong events are being planned across the U.S., with organizers calling for no school, no work, no shopping. In protest of government policies they say put billionaires' needs above those of workers. In Chicago, several local labor unions and community groups, including the Chicago Teachers Union, SEIU Healthcare Illinois and Indiana, Indivisible Chicago, and the Chicago Federation of Labor jointly announced an economic blackout for Chicago on May 1st. In Los Angeles, the LA May Day Coalition, comprising more than 50 local organizations, is organizing an economic blackout around numerous demands, including immigration rights, voting rights, abolishing ICE, anti-war protests, and defending workers' rights, end quote. So to talk about what is happening this May Day, why it's important, and what you can do to get involved, I am really grateful to be joined today by 3 guests who are all involved in organizing May Day events this week from Philadelphia to Chicago to Iowa. First, we're joined by Jana Korn, who currently serves as the Chief of Staff for the Philadelphia Council AFL-CIO, and also serves on the board of Philadelphia Jobs with Justice. Prior to becoming Chief of Staff, Jana was the organizing director at her Central Labor Council, and prior to that, Jana worked with SEIU Healthcare Pennsylvania, organizing alongside hospital and home health care workers to build power both inside and outside the workplace. And we are also joined by returning guest Jeff Kurtz. Jeff was a locomotive engineer and union member for 40 years, and he is a member of Railroad Workers United. He served as a union officer most of his career, including 8 years as president of BLET Local 391 and chairman of the BLET Iowa State Legislative Board, where he oversaw safety and legislative matters for the union in the state for 4 railroads for 10 years. He retired in 2014 and served as state representative for 1 term in the Iowa House after winning the 2018 election in his House district. And we are also joined today by John Emiliano from the Tahanan Center in Chicago. John is a healthcare worker and organizer in Chicago, advocating for the Filipino community, and is also part of Tanggol Migrante, a grassroots Filipino migrant defense network. Jana, Jeff, John, thank you all so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. And, before we get into the details of this week's May Day protests, I want to start first by asking you 3, as, working people in America, as dedicated members of the labor movement, what does May Day mean to you? Why is this such an important holiday?
Thanks, Max. And thanks for the opportunity. I'm really excited to be here in conversation with folks about May Day, International Workers' Day. I think for me, May Day is an opportunity for workers to lead in a world where we very rarely have the opportunity, and to continue the fight that folks started hundreds of years ago for both bread and roses. We have a rose in our slogan that we're putting everywhere. It's really the opportunity for workers to say, nobody else is coming to save us. It is our world that we're going to fight for. And May Day is the day that we have set to lead that fight. And I think for me, as a relatively young person in the labor movement, this is kind of an opportunity for us to test where we are in the fight to build like a more militant, more powerful fighting labor movement that hasn't really existed in my lifetime. We only really started doing big things for May Day in Philadelphia last year. It hasn't been a holiday that the labor movement really took on for ourselves, right? We're big on the Labor Day picnic, but maybe less so on the May Day fight. And so really like as an opportunity to test where we are in terms of the amount of risk and the amount of disruption that the labor movement is willing to take. And then I think lastly, as we know, right, International Workers' Day, and it's an opportunity for us to really be in solidarity with workers around the world. And particularly now, right, in like a moment when the US or workers in the US might feel particularly isolated from workers around the world, to say like, no, actually our fight is your fight and vice versa, and to really continue the fight for an international workers movement.
To me, it means solidarity, especially in the railroad industry. We've got 13 different unions, and we've all got our own issues. And the rail carriers have been just wonderful about using those issues against us. And so we have had no solidarity, almost no solidarity whatsoever. Even in the 2022 contract fight, we were together, and then unions started to peel off. And eventually it, came down to our politicians on both sides of the aisle betraying us because we weren't together. So this is something we've done this here in Lee County before. We've had a May Day celebration. This year, I think it's going to be a lot different. I was in northern Iowa, actually canvassing for an independent candidate for Congress, and I walked and knocked doors from 10:30 to about 2 o'clock, and it was amazing because, unlike Jana, I'm ancient. I'm one of the ancient labor guys, but for years and years, they said, "Oh, this is year. We're coming back. And I've always said, okay, I probably not. This year, when we were knocking the doors, 85% of the doors, and this was a very red county, at least 85, maybe 90% of the doors we went to, people were saying, we got to do something different. We absolutely have to do something different than we've been doing. Being from that world, we can't trust politicians unless we put the proverbial gun to their head. And the only way we're going to do that is through solidarity. And, they want us there when they want money and when they want workers. But after that, they forget about us. And this is probably going to be a theme for what we do on Friday. We're going to make it very clear. I don't care what party you are. If you are not for workers, you're not going to get anything from us.
Well, and Jeff, before we toss it to John, I'm just curious, as a as you describe, an ancient member of the labor movement, as a veteran worker, like, did May Day used to mean something different back in the day? Or I mean, was it ever an important thing for you, or do you feel like that's kind of like a newer tradition that's building in America?
It's definitely newer. When I was working, especially the last 15 or 20 years, we were so busy. Ironically, our officials, railroad officials, they got Labor Day off. The workers had to work. And, May Day just didn't mean that much to us. It didn't really mean a lot until I started working with the Lee County chapter, labor chapter. And one of our vice presidents, Terry Duncan, she is just big on this. I mean, every May Day, we've got to do something. And she has been absolutely right, hit the nail on the head. So I think this is a relatively new phenomenon. And from what I'm hearing, what we're doing this Friday is going to be pretty well attended.
And John, what about you? What does May Day mean to you? Why is this an important holiday for you?
Yeah, I think especially as a young person doing the labor organizing and being in Chicago and also being having connections and being from the Philippines. I think May Day is this huge culmination of really the experiences of our community as well. We really have, for us, our migrants are also our workers. And so, May Day, especially now more than ever, is a huge joint effort between the problems of workers and migrants because they're often, overlapped. And I think this is a really big opportunity for us to really bridge that gap and have something really large. And, I think for us, Filipino community, a lot of us leave the Philippines in the first place to find work abroad. So even our own migration away from our home is a problem of work itself. And so when we come to America and work these conditions as caregivers and food service, there is a real need for us to really link those struggles of our workers here in this country and the struggle of our people back home where we actually couldn't find work or there's no jobs. And I think one really cool thing about being from Chicago and the Philippines is May Day started here in Chicago, and we have the May Day movement, but also in the Philippines, we actually have a very militant workers movement called Kilosong Mayo Uno, or the May Day movement in English. And yeah, I'm already watching all the preparation happen across here in this country and back home in the Philippines for us, and seeing all the workers really, take on these struggles, not only struggles for their rights and livelihoods, but like the larger economic struggle of people all over the world. Like in the Philippines, we have an energy crisis. People can't even get to work right now. And for us here in America, that means we're sending, double the amount of money that we were having to send before. And now it's becoming this burden of us really taking on double the shifts, double the conditions. And, when we're forced to do this, I think May Day is the opportunity to bring workers together to really talk about what conditions they have, but also how can we really fight against this like systematic exploitation that happens, from the Philippines, from all over the global South towards this country, and how can we link that international solidarity of workers all over the world to really like take back, the means that they are creating, right? The wealth that they really create. So yeah, it's for us and for me, it's this huge, culmination of everything, our whole existence, our whole stories, and to really, take that back and put it in the hands of the people who make the wealth of the world, and to really just show workers that this is a holiday for them and that they have the power to, continue pushing forward, celebrate the gains that we have had historically and, continue making them as well.
Hell yeah. No, I thought that was all beautifully and powerfully put by all three of you. And, I think like, just by nature of growing up, in this country, yeah, like we're taught Labor Day is like the quote unquote workers' holiday, but it's always just a sort of an excuse for a picnic and an excuse to sort of look at our own history of labor struggle as a thing of the past, right? As something that, our forefathers fought for, but now everything's great. Now we don't need to struggle anymore. And I think, what I'm hearing in all three of what you're saying is that, May Day really, it pays homage to, the traditions and the struggles and the ancestors who have like fought for us to get to where we are now. But it's also very much a reminder that that struggle is inherited by each new generation and must be carried on and moved forward, or else we're going to see it slide back. We're going to see what we've been seeing in this country and increasingly around the world, which is like the the hard-won gains and victories of the working class, of the labor movement, are being stripped away, to say nothing of the gains from the civil rights movement, the gay rights movement. I mean, like, they're coming after all of us, right? And that, I think, is a kind of perfect setup to what makes May Day 2026 so important, right? Because, you all said the word solidarity, right? You all talked about how May Day is about bringing workers together. And as we know, the greatest tool that the bosses, the billionaires, the power brokers and order givers of our world, their number one trick is to divide and conquer. And like, you see that in America today, right? I mean, people are being pitted against each other. We're being pushed away from each other. We're being told to hate each other and fear each other. And we're moving away from each other the more afraid we are, because we're trying to hold on to what little we still have. That's a recipe for exploitation. It's a recipe for us to be taken advantage of and brutalized more easily. And so the message of coming together and uniting across differences to confront, like the monstrous forces that we're confronting today, I think is really important, powerful, and urgent. But I want to sort of ask you three, I want to go around the table and ask if you could just sort of set the scene for listeners, like in Philadelphia, in Chicago, in Iowa. Like, what is the sort of atmosphere right now leading up to this May Day? Like, what are workers going through there, and how are you translating that to this push to be on the streets this Friday?
Well, I'll talk a little bit, and then you can tell me if I actually answered that question. But last year in 2025, it was the first few months of the second Trump administration. Already hundreds of thousands of workers had lost their collective bargaining rights. Folks were being rounded up in the streets. It was a very scary time. And we looked around and we were like, okay, we haven't actually done anything for May Day in many years. The CLC hasn't. There's been sort of the occasional action here or there. But on May 1st, 2025, we want to take the opportunity to show that the labor movement is going to respond to the threats of authoritarianism. We're not going to wait for the parties to respond. We're not going to wait for the nonprofits to respond, right? Like, we're going to take May Day and show what we believe. And so we brought a really large coalition of organizations, local unions, immigrant rights groups, community organizations together under the slogan of Workers Over Billionaires. And we ended up having 7,000 or 8,000 people in the streets, which, according to my local nerdy labor historian, was the largest May Day action since 1935 in Philadelphia. We're on a smaller scale than Chicago. But we also did sort of a mass civil disobedience, right? We had 70 people take arrest, including 10 labor leaders, which was a bit unprecedented, right? And it really showed that, like, labor leaders, union members are willing to do more and risk more than we ever have, because we understand the stakes, right? People are struggling. And so we were really proud of the action we pulled off. People were really excited about it, and really excited to see really, like, the labor movement leading in Philadelphia. In the months following May Day, we brought those same organizations together, basically under, like, basically any organization that shared the same theory of change, which was, we need to organize a lot more people, right? Like, our path to power is organized people, and we're not big enough. And so if folks want to commit to an arc of work until May Day 2026, with the idea that we just need to organize more and more people, come on in. And so we have been working together basically since last summer, and it was basically like an internal organizing campaign shared amongst many organizations, right? So folks were going into their memberships, talking to union members, talking to folks in their congregations, in their neighborhoods, with the same organizing wrap, which was basically, what's going on in your life? What keeps you up at night? What's your hopes? What's your dreams for the city of Philadelphia? And let me explain to you why it's the billionaires' fault, right? Which requires some real political ed, right? It's like, you're mad that your library's closed on the weekend because our libraries are rarely open 7 days a week. let me explain to you how that could be funded, but it's not, right? And out of all of those conversations, we had thousands of conversations with workers. We have built out what we're calling the Working People's Vision for Philadelphia, which is sort of our vision for if workers actually had more power than the billionaires, this is what Philadelphia would feel like, would look like. And it's beautiful, right? Right? It's unions for all. It's safe homes and neighborhoods for everybody. It's one job should be enough. Healthcare for everyone. Not like to all of us, it's like nothing that crazy, right? It's not that radical. But it came out of these thousands of worker conversations. And on May Day this year, on Friday, outside of City Hall in Philadelphia, we're going to have thousands of workers vote to ratify that vision. And so we're going to sort of be out in public, publicly voting. Yes, this is our vision for Philadelphia. And not just that, but we're willing together to fight for it, right? And to make it a reality.
Yeah, around here, one of the real problems that labor has is the fact that everybody is working mandatory overtime. They don't have time to go to union meetings. They don't have time to go to union picnics. They don't have time to just get together with their union brothers and sisters. We've seen that in the railroad. We were the frog in the boiling water. It went up. They slowly took things away from us. And eventually we came to 2022 when I first met you, Max, with a high vis policy that basically killed people because it was so draconian. And it got better for a while, but now it's worse. It's worse than it ever was because now they're going after union officers that take time off to defend their members are being penalized for taking time off and are being fired. And with the Railway Labor Act, what happens with that? It takes forever before you get any justice whatsoever, if you get justice at all. This is starting to spread to other companies. Like I said, we've seen mandatory overtime for a lot of manufacturing around here. 612s, 712s, 616s, things like this. How are you going to have solidarity when you're at work all the time? Either you're at work or you're sleeping. So this is one of the things that we've talked about in some of our chapter meetings. That we've got to get our membership to realize what's happening to them, because they see the big paychecks from the all the overtime. They should have those paychecks anyway without the overtime. I mean, they should be able to enjoy their families, be able to enjoy life, be able to enjoy their coworkers. But it's getting harder and harder to do. And that's why I think this May Day is so important. I'm really hoping that we see a big turnout. We've got a lot of guest speakers coming in. We have actually barred politicians from speaking, except me. But
I was going to say, you barred all politicians, or is there one exception?
No, we let the old guys come in. So, this is a day where we say we've had enough. Now we're coming to get ours.
Yeah, I think for us in Chicago, really, under the second Trump presidency, we already knew what was going to happen, right? Like the countless attacks on workers, migrant workers. We formed our grassroots, our migrant defense networks, even as early as October of 2024, right when he was announced to take the presidency. And did all that education, know your rights training, community build up. And like even in January, some of the first reports of workers already being taken were actually between caregivers that were both Filipino and Latino. and they were taken right outside of their facility, right, as they were going into work. And really showing that like these attacks on our migrant community were the attack on the working community as well. And, throughout 2025, the Filipino community, alongside so many other communities, waged so many campaigns of like ICE Watch, migrant defense. Like we in particular took up a lot of deportation defense campaigns of our community members who were workers, who were legal residents even. Most of our cases were green card holders, and they were people who were caregivers. They were, truck drivers, food service, really working all these awful conditions. And then to be picked up and detained really showed how we needed to bring in the labor movement and the, migrant movement together to really push to end these attacks that we were seeing. And so our May Day last year, similar to Jana's, was pretty big in Chicago, really linking the, migrant workers and putting it at the forefront. And, as we continued taking on our campaigns, especially with Midway Blitz, we saw ICE outside of, stores, schools, hospitals, communities. Our workers continued to be those folks that were on the forefront of really defending our communities and our families and our people. And so, we continued taking on those cases of workers and building solidarity with other working groups like SEIU and healthcare worker groups, church groups, youth and student groups, as much as we could to really broaden this fight, but really putting our workers at the forefront. And with the continued attacks of the US all over the world, we were sent into economic crisis both here in the States and in the Philippines. And, it really became real when so many of our workers, similar to what Jeff was saying, were having to work this overtime because, like I said earlier, there's actually no energy in the Philippines. Like there's an oil crisis, the gas prices were rising, and we really saw how our workers were working double the amount that they were before to support their families back home, and what kind of conditions they were forced to be under, right? Not only the duress of really being scared to go outside and to go to work and, not even being able to drop their kids off at school out of fear, but now they were having to put themselves out there even more and working to the point of their health declining. We even had a community member all the way in SoCal that we were connected to, he died of overworking, actually. And, when we as the Filipino migrant community really asked the Philippine government, similar to how the Korean government, many Latin American governments really stood up for their workers, they were not willing to stand up for us. And actually were super compliant with what the US wanted to do and how they wanted to treat their Filipino community here. And every time we had asked what are you going to do to support us, there was nothing. So even our own migrant community here and our Filipino workers are taking up fights both against the US government to hold them accountable, to expose and oppose those conditions of what they're seeing in their communities and what it's like in detention centers, but also to challenge and expose and oppose the Philippine government too for actually working with the US. They sent us abroad and now there's no support for us. And, we've even seen cases of the Philippine government working to expedite deportations of our community members, hiding it from us. And we have to chase them to really, tell us where they're flying them out to. And so, our workers are really seeing the truth of, what the working class is willing to do to us, right? To treat us like we're nothing, only use us for our labor. And then, when we're not useful anymore, to just put us in these detention centers, send us back to a country where we don't have jobs, opportunities. I think one of the aunties told me, she was like, we come to the States and we fear criminalization, but what's scarier than not being able to feed your own family? And that's the reality of what we're going through today. But, as we did this, we were able to build a huge mass movement. We've been able to free Filipino workers. We've freed 12 Filipino migrants from detention across the country, a few here in the States. or in Chicago as well. So there's been huge gains, and really out of that, struggle and showing people what we could do, we launched the Tahanan Center, which is a Filipino migrant center here in Chicago, and we're being housed with the Latino Union of Chicago, and really, emboldening and building up our workers' movement. And so for May Day, we have so many things happening because Chicago is huge in the labor movement. We have folks going to high schools with large migrant student populations going to present at our worker centers. And then there's like mini rallies happening, like in Albany Park, where our migrant center is, where there's huge migrant populations. We're doing a mini rally there. And then some of us are going to the Illinois Medical District that houses the largest hospitals across Illinois. And the healthcare workers are having a rally there. And then youth and students from our Tahanan Center are also having rallies on their campuses. And they're all coming together to culminate at Union Park as different sectors, but really to unify under one banner of the workers over billionaires, right? And that's super exciting for us to really see like the breadth of all these different groups. We have church groups coming, youth and student groups coming, community groups, healthcare worker groups, et cetera, to really come together because, working workers is the issue that really binds us together. So yeah, we're expecting a huge rally at Union Park in Chicago that is like surrounded by like 5 major unions like SEIU, pipe fitters, etc. So yeah, that's what we got coming up. And even after that, the Filipino community across the US is coming together for a national migrant workers conference to go confront our Philippine president who's coming here to talk about why he's a star in migration and treating workers properly when we know the truth of our own conditions, both here in the States and back home in the Philippines. So that will be happening like May 3rd through May 6th. Like we will be confronting him in New York as well. And, what kind of audacity is it to have a conference about migrants here in the US and boast about how well you treat them when we're watching what the US is doing to the workers and to migrant workers especially. So yeah, a lot of confrontations coming up and the building of our mass movement.
Yeah, that's great, baby. I mean, that's like what it's all about, right? I mean, that's the whole spirit of the holiday, right? Is you don't get what you deserve by just asking your oppressors nicely for it. If history teaches us anything, it should be that. Working people's gains in improving our lives and building a better world, they come because we fight for them and because we fight together for them and overcome, the many obstacles that we have to face. And I wanted to sort of round us around the final turn here on that note, right? I mean, I want to give you all both one more chance, like if there are any other points you wanted to make about, what is going to be happening in Philly, Chicago, Iowa, but also around the country this week on May Day. Like anything else that we haven't covered that you want to stress to people out there listening. But also like I'm curious to get everyone's take on like what this May Day means for whatever comes next, right? I mean, like how this these organizing efforts, this day of action, this day of protest, these economic blackouts, like, what is the kind of goal for those actions? Like, in terms of like communicating to power and communicating a message to our fellow workers, but also like, what is that building towards? Like what sort of infrastructure for something different could come out of this? So any final thoughts you wanted to share on that? And then I promise I'll let you all go.
I mean, I could probably talk for a while. I'll try to keep it brief. A couple of thoughts. I guess similar to John, what you were saying, I think one of the other sort of interventions that we're trying to make this year is to like put a name and a face to the bill. Like when we say workers over billionaires is not just like this like amorphous figure, right? They're real people. And in Philadelphia, we're kind of a poor city. We don't have that many billionaires, but we have one, right? The CEO of Comcast is the only billionaire that lives in the city. So why should we as a city accept that they take from us? And then with that money, what do? They donate to Trump's ballroom project, right? Well, people in Philadelphia are struggling, right? we're struggling. Our transportation system barely works. We're at risk of having 17 schools closed down this year, right? And these giant employers take from us, and then instead of giving back to the city, they align with the authoritarians, right? They go to Mar-a-Lago, they do whatever. And it's not even just the private companies, right? It's Eds and Meds, it's Penn and Jefferson who do the exact same thing, right? And everywhere that has an Eds and Meds economy knows the drill, right? And so after we ratify our vision on May Day, we're going to take folks on a march past a couple of these key employers to make very clear, right? Like when we say workers over billionaires, we are the workers and you all are the billionaires. It's not something up in the sky, and it's not just Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, right? We know our local folks. The other thing is that folks may have heard it's the 250th anniversary of this here country. In Philadelphia, folks have been gearing up to quote unquote celebrate that anniversary for a long time. We know that we have the FIFA World Cup here this summer, the MLB All-Star Game, the 250th anniversary, amongst a lot of other things. And so in Philadelphia, we're really aware that the world's eyes are going to be on us. And we have an opportunity to continue to share the vision that we are fighting for and to really call the question on folks, like really, truly, which side are you on? Workers or billionaires? Visitors coming in, every elected official, we're going to be asking the same question. I think the next piece, and folks are starting to talk about this, is preparing to defend our democracy towards the end of the year. And I think really for us in the labor movement, it's thinking about how do we build the capacity to really disrupt, to strike, right, when necessary, to shut things down when we have to. And that's something that we have not been called to do as a labor movement in a very long time. And so how are we spending the next couple of months building those muscles up and just like really, we got to shake our training wheels off because the big fight is coming. And so how are we using May Day and the months following to really get ready for whatever is going to come? And then I think my last point that I want to just make is like, I think we have an obligation as the labor movement, as leaders in the labor movement, to help folks imagine a different kind of world, right? And like we say a lot as we've been preparing for May Day, right? That like we have been living in the political imagination of the billionaire class, and it's time to live in our own, right? That like imagination is not a frivolous practice. It's necessary. And we haven't been doing it enough. And so it's hard. It's hard for workers to say, like, I don't know whether I can pay my rent or my grocery bill or keep the lights on. And you're asking me to imagine this nice, pretty world, right? But we have to. We have to give ourselves something better to fight for. And I think that's part of our job and like part of this national movement is to say, like, we are going to win a better world. And it's going to be a lot better than this one.
One thing that I want to say about this is part of the solution is going to have to be, whether we like it or not, it's going to have to be politics. When I was in the House, I saw the potential that we had where we could do a lot of good. And then I saw the reality of it, too. And I think we need more labor people to run for office. We're starting to see that here. In fact, a guy that you interviewed from Burlington, Iowa, Marcus Derby, is running for state rep. And I think one of the reasons he's running is because Case, which has been in Burlington forever, is pulling out. A town of 20,000 people is going to lose 200 good jobs. And this is happening. I know Maytag is moving out of, I can't remember the community. It's up near central Iowa someplace. But this is happening a lot. And, the way we combat this is to get our own in there. And I would encourage you, after I played the party game, I would encourage people to run as independents, because what I'm starting to see is there's a real thirst for people that aren't beholden to either side. Because in reality, they're one and the same. I mean, that's just what it is. The final point I want to make is, Jana keeps talking about billionaires, and I watch in the morning just to get my blood pressure up, so I make sure that it's high enough that I can get through the day. I watch financial news. And, they have the billionaires come on and talk about, what great things they're doing. And then they talk about Zora and Mom Donnie giving free bus tickets to people. How can he do this? And he's going to get child care and all this. Oh, my God, how are we going to afford that? And I'm thinking, and they keep talking about all these working people getting free stuff. And I look at these people and I think, how hard do you have to work to make $1 billion? Because I've seen people work their ass off and they'll never even sniff being a millionaire. And you've got some guy that throws his money around and all of a sudden he's worth $1 billion and that billion turns into 10 billion. And now we've got a guy that they say in the next year, there's an 88% chance he's going to be a trillionaire. That's where the free stuff is going. It's not going to workers. And that's why we need people in politics that understand this, that they're getting the free stuff. And we need to cut that off so that people can live and they can have good lives. And our immigrants and migrant workers can have a good. I have never understood this. What the problem is with people coming into this country. So anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox and let somebody else talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree so much with both what Jeff and Jana were saying, that it's really what comes next is, building something big. Like, we are trying to, coalesce everyone in Chicago, aside from whatever group or sector you come from, whether you focus on migrants' rights, women's rights, your church sector, to really come together and not only be on like the defensive of the attacks that we've been seeing, but how do we start being on the offensive and actually show workers and show the community that when they fight, they can really win. And like Jana said, like, it's having those really specific targets, right? There's so many targets we have here in Chicago, like the Trump Tower is here and things like that. We even have so many consulates and international governing bodies that exist here in Chicago. And so for us to really strengthen our movement across the city, and then to really start, targeting and pressuring those things and be in solidarity with all movements, is what I think is really the next vision. Like I said, we're having these confrontations as a Filipino community with our Philippine government in the upcoming days after May Day as well. And, there's, bringing together this summer of like so many conferences, like the International League of People's Struggles, to really, it's being hosted here in this country to really show like, workers and a militant mass movement, that it's not just the people of this country that can like strike blows, but, be in solidarity with like the rest of the world that is striking blows and can also really help us envision a future, where we don't have the exploitation and really, take back, like y'all were saying, all those means, and like even targeting things like the One Big Beautiful Bill that's like super actively taking away from us here in this country and going towards the militarization of our communities abroad and things like that. And linking the struggles of workers, church, all over the world, youth and students, migrants, women, to ensure that we can, create future and, not only show them what we're fighting against, but show them what we're fighting for. So I think, these alliance building and solidarity across all the sectors and is a huge opportunity that will happen at May Day. And, we'll continue moving throughout the summer. It's going to be really hot in Chicago throughout the summer as we're building up towards even 2028, when some of the biggest major unions all over the country and in Chicago are going to have to re-sign their contracts, and building up towards, what could that actually look like. So yeah, the strength, anyone with any edge should come in and, help strengthen our movement across, and for us to finally start dealing, real blows, real tangible blows, and making these huge gains for, the community all over the world, both here and in the global South as well.
All right, gang, that's going to wrap things up for us today. I want to thank our guests, Jana Korn, Chief of Staff for the Philadelphia Council AFL-CIO, Jeff Kurtz, retired railroad engineer and union officer and former state representative in the Iowa House of Representatives, and John Emiliano from the Tahanan Center in Chicago. You can find out more about the important work that they're all doing and about the May Day events happening in their areas and yours this week using the links that we provided in the show notes for this episode. And of course, I want to thank you all for listening, and I want to thank you for caring. We'll see y'all back here next time for another episode of Working People, and in the meantime, go explore all the great work that we're doing at the Real News Network, where we do grassroots reporting that lifts up the voices and stories from the front lines of struggle. Check us out across our YouTube channel, our podcast feeds, our website, and our social media pages, and help us do more work like this by going to therealnews.com/donate and becoming a supporter today. I promise you guys, it really makes a difference. I'm Maximilian Alvarez. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Happy May Day. All power to the workers. Solidarity forever.
When my face you no longer see, I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever we go, we are going to roll the union on the song. I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever hungry are we. Just as hungry can be. The song, I live on, yes, I live on. Where mean things are happening in this land, it's read a song. I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever the book mean things are happening in this land is read, I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever the videotape of me is shown, I live on, yes, I live on. If I have help to make this a better world to live in, I'll live on, yes, I'll live on. When my body is silent and in some lonesome grave, I live on, yes, I live on. When my songs and poems are read, I live on, yes, I live on.